Hello, welcome to Physics for Students. My name is Shaunak and I welcome you to the second episode of Tagore Einstein Conversations. Just to recap, if you have looked into my first video, the Tagore Einstein Conversations which we discussed, I would like to recap before we start the second episode on the salient points that we covered in the first video. The first meeting between Einstein and Tagore, which took place around July 14th, 1930 at the outhouse of Einstein, somewhere at Potsdam near Kaput, where Tagore went to meet Einstein. The conversation that took place between Tagore and Einstein was mostly called On the Nature of Reality. So we talked about the space-time, if you can recall that Tagore was telling that you were busy hunting down two ancient entities, time and space. And we discussed why time and space and how Einstein reunited time and space into his theory of relativity. We also have gone through one term which is called humanity subsumes everything. And we have noticed that how Tagore was speaking about that humanity above all is the truth, and it is humanity which subsumes everything, while Einstein was of the opinion that the supernatural being or the consciousness is somehow out there and humanity is out here. So there was a difference between the opinion that they were talking about. We also touched based on Einstein's thought of world as a dependent on humanity, independent on humanity. We also found that Tagore's thought of the supernatural, superpersonal being, and how Einstein talked that if the beauty of Apollo Belvedere is out there and we human beings are not present, that is we shut down or we close our eyes, is that the beauty doesn't exist? Tagore said no. Tagore told that truth is realized and realized only through man. So that was initially the first discussion. We cited certain examples from Tagore's poems and Einstein's belief of the scientific world which is independent of human being, truth which is independent of human being. And we ended with this line when Einstein told that I cannot prove that my conception is right, but that is my religion. So we ended here when Einstein told that I cannot prove that my concept, but that is my religion. So we talked in the last episode that what was Einstein's belief. So he is telling that I cannot prove, but that is my religion. So does Einstein is telling that religion is something where you just close your eyes and you believe on something and which you cannot prove. So now we will take on where we have ended about Einstein's statement that I cannot prove, but that is my religion. So we start with the first episode from here. Now, before we go into this episode, I would like to mention one point which Tagore once mentioned in the Religion of Man, that therefore the world apart from us do not exist. This entire world apart from us do not exist. I would like to remind the viewers also that if you have seen my first episode, I have made a note that we are not here to make any judgment, who is right, who is wrong, who is great, or whose thoughts and ideas are much more prominent. No. We are just here to talk about the conversation and make certain explanations and elucidations so that we understand the ultimate crux, the bottom line of the discussion which took place between Tagore and Einstein. We are not here to make any opinion. So we start the second episode where we ended, where it tells this statement. Beauty is the ideal of perfect harmony which is in the universal being. Truth, the perfect comprehension of the universal mind. We individuals approach it through our own mistakes and blunders, through our accumulated experience, through our illumined consciousness. How otherwise can we know truth? I'll just repeat once more. Beauty is the ideal of perfect harmony which is in the universal being. Truth, the perfect comprehension of the universal mind. We individuals approach it through our own mistakes and blunders, through our accumulated experience, through our illumined consciousness. How otherwise can we know truth? Now, if you note in this particular line where Tagore points out that we approach through our blunders, through our accumulated experience, we have seen that where we talked about Shiman maje ashim tumi, bajao apon shur. So within the limit, you are the unlimited, the superpersonal being. So of Tagore's conversation, what he's trying to tell is that the blunders and the mistakes that we make is this we human being. That is the limit, that is the Shima, that is the limit. But he, the superpersonal being, is unlimited, Ashim to me. Now, if you see the first line which Tagore tells that beauty is the ideal of perfect harmony, which is in the universal being. Now, if you understand this particular line, what Tagore is telling, if you see the blossoming of the flower around us, right? The beautiful flower which blossoms. We will take an example in this episode where ideally Tagore speaks of that. So any perfect, manifestation, it can be a perfect cricket shot. If you see Sachin Tendulkar or Rahul Dravid playing or Brian Lara, when the commentator says that the head position, the footwork and the position of the hand is absolutely perfect. So an ideal cricket shot, an ideal music, an ideal symphony. Say, for example, when we listen to these great symphonies of Mozart and Beethoven, you see that every chord, every music, every violin, every piano, even the background chords, the cellos, etc., are in perfect harmony. That means what Tagore is telling, that beauty is the ideal of perfect harmony, which is the universal being. Truth, the perfect comprehension of the universal mind. That means beauty happens when it is in perfect harmony of the universal being, that is, you can call God or supernatural, a superpersonal being. And truth, the perfect comprehension of the universal mind. That means the universal mind, until and unless we human beings is got a perfect comprehension, we won't be able to subsume or submerge our soul with that superpersonal being. So even if you take it, for example, a typical cricket shot, a typical wonderful sculpture, for example, what we see in Ajanta and Ellora caves, a wonderful music, a wonderful creation of human being, it can be even Apollo Belvedere, which we talked about, is actually the perfect harmony. And beauty will only happen when there is a perfect harmony with the universal being. Now, you might have a question that beauty will only happen when there is a harmony with the universal being. Does that in some way means that we are talking that when God or the superpersonal being manifests, then only beauty is going to happen? Then only a perfect cricket shot or a wonderful sculpture or a wonderful manifestation of any human creation is going to happen? Well, I leave the decision up to you. You let me know in the comment box. But I would like to quote of the what is there in the 41st verse of Gita's 10th chapter, which ideally speaks of yad yad vibhuti mat sattvang shri madur jitame vava tattateva vagachatvam mamatejo sashambhavam. Okay, this is Sanskrit, so let me just give you a better explanation of this. So it says that yat yat, whatever, or as on when, yad yad vibhuti. Now vibhuti is something which is called all-pervading, opulent, right? Yad yad vibhuti mat sattvang, whenever the opulent or the all-pervading things happens, sattvang, when it is true, shri mat, shri is beauty. You know, in Bengali or in this language, in Sanskrit, when you use the shri, the beauty, or the wonderful thing, you know, shri is beauty. So yat yat vibhuti mat sattvam, whenever the opulent or the magnificent, the beauty happens, shri mat, the beauty or the wonderful thing, shri mat urjitam evava. Urjit, I have taken a note, urjit means something which is glorious, which is wonderful. So yat yat vibhuti mat sattvam shri mat urjitame vava. Urjit, that means glorious things happen. Tat tat, then, I would say it is a repetition, then, actually what means tat tat. So yat yat vibhuti mat sattvam shri mat urjitame vava. Whenever the all-pervading comes in front, shri, the glory, the beauty Urjitam comes into, the beauty comes into the form of glorious, in the form of glory. Tat tat eva avagachatvam mama tejo asashambhavam. Tat tat eva. And then avagacham. Avagach in Sanskrit means know. That means Krishna is telling to Arjun, know you Arjun, or know thy Arjun. Avagach. Avagach means to know early, or to know. Tattat eva avagachatvam mama tejo, that is my glory, asashang bhavam. This is which is called, Mamatejo Sashambhama. Sashambhamam is actually, it is the sandhi of Angsha plus Bhava. In all, it actually says that, oh no, O Arjuna, that whenever you see a wonderful thing or beautiful thing is manifesting, understand that is me. That is the super personal being. So I just repeat, yat yat vibhuti mat sattvang, whenever you see that the opulent or the all-pervading things, Shri, there is a beautiful, there is a glory, yat yat vibhuti mat sattvang, Shri mat urjitame vava, urjit means glory, tat tat eva avagachattvang, mama tejo sashambhavam. It is my part, mama tej, my glory, and it is the angsha, mama tejo asha, angsha bhavam. So it has, in sandhi, when it is taken together, it is called mama tejo sasham bhavam. It means my tej or my glory, there is a part, angsha bhavam. There is a part of it, right? So this is actually what, what is the basic philosophy of Tagore, that beauty is the ideal of perfect harmony which is in the universal being. So beauty is only going to happen when there is a perfect harmony with the universal being, that is mama tejo sashambhamam. When you find that my grace or that my splendor, there is a spark, there is a small angsha, small part of that. So truth, the perfect harmony of the universal man. Truth is only going to happen when there is a perfect harmony with the universal being, right? And he says that we individuals approach it through our own limitations and blunders, through our accumulated experience and our illumined consciousness. That means these experiences as limitations, once it gets illumined into our consciousness, then only we can understand truth. How otherwise can we understand truth? So Tagore is confident that there is no other way in order to identify truth except this. That is through universal being. When beauty is in perfect harmony, when the individual mind is in perfect harmony with the universal mind. Now, let us see what Einstein tells. Now, here is Einstein telling, I cannot prove scientifically that truth must be conceived as a truth that is valid independent of humanity. But I believe it firmly. I believe, for instance, that the Pythagorean theorem in geometry states something that is approximately true, independent of the existence of man. Anyway, if there is a reality independent of man, there is a truth relative to this reality, and in the same way, the negation of the first engenders the negation of the existence of the latter. This is what Einstein told. That now, you see, what he tells is that I cannot prove it scientifically. The truth must be conceived as a truth that is valid independent of humanity. If you're following this conversation right from the beginning, you will see what Einstein has been telling is that truth is independent of humanity. Now, but he says, but I believe it firmly. For example, he gives that the Pythagorean theorem in geometry states something that is approximately true, independent of the existence of man. So Einstein continues to stick to his principle that truth is independent of man. Anyway, if there is a reality independent of man, there is also a truth relative to the reality. Now, this actually brings us to a very remarkable question or a point of our discussion, is that does Einstein believe that religion is something which cannot be proved? Right. Now, a religion, is it based on faith? And if it is based on faith, what kind of faith? Is it a blind faith? Because he tells that I cannot prove scientifically. Now, you might have a question that religion or belief is something which is out of science. we will see that it is no, what Tagore will tell. So this is the question that we need to think. As I told you, this is not a conversation, or this is not right that we should opine about what Einstein told. Is it right or wrong? Is it supersedes Tagore or Tagore supersedes Einstein? Absolutely not. So now the question is that is religion is something which is blind? Because he says that I cannot prove it scientifically, but somehow he believes, I believe it firmly. I believe, for instance, that the Pythagorean theorem says something which is approximately true. Now we will soon see what Einstein meant by Pythagorean theorem. But before I go into this, I would like to tell a few lines. When he tells it, it recalls that we believe in something that cannot be proven, because he tells that I cannot prove this scientifically, but somehow I believe it firmly. Now, if you have read Alfred Lord Tennyson's In Memoriam, AHH, now there are a few lines which actually speaks of this particular philosophy. I know that In Memoriam was written it is a kind of a requiem on Arthur Henry Hallam. Arthur Henry Hallam was actually a very, very close associate of Tennyson, and he died, I think, at a very young age of 22 out of cerebral hemorrhage. So one line which Tennyson tells here is that, I hold it true whatever befall, I feel it when I sorrow most. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Wonderful lines. Very famous line of In Memoriam. It is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. But more important than these lines are these lines which Tennyson writes. Strong Son of God, immortal love, whom we that have not seen thy face, by faith and faith alone embrace, believing where we cannot prove. Wonderful lines. By faith and faith alone embrace, believing where we cannot prove. That means we need to embrace, we need to get hold of something which we cannot prove. And that is what Tennyson calls to be faith. And why he tells that? Strong Son of God, immortal love. Love is immortal, strong Son of God, whom we cannot see thy face. Now, same thing you see Einstein is telling, that he cannot prove it scientifically, but he believes it firmly. Because we cannot see thy face, we cannot see the face of God. By faith and faith alone embrace, believing where we cannot prove. I've been translating Maulana Abul Kalam Azad's Ghubare-e-Khatir, which I'm sure to make a website in the next year. I have used this line, and Maulana Azad in his letters uses this line, by faith and faith alone embrace, believing where we cannot prove. When we cannot see thy face, what Einstein feels that when we cannot see the face of God, yet he firmly believes, by faith and faith alone embrace, believing where we cannot prove. So this is actually what Einstein believed when Tagore told that what else we can achieve the truth. Now, in order to know what actually meant by Pythagorean theorem, what Einstein tells that I believe it's something that is approximately true, independent of the existence of man. Now, I would like to make a note for the viewer. This book, which you can see on the screen, Thomas Stanley's Pythagoras, His Life and Teaching. This is a wonderful book. It speaks a lot about Pythagoras' life, but I would like to draw one attention, because Pythagorean theorem, or the cult of thought which Pythagoras in Greece they used to believe, the group of Pythagorean theorems believe, is that number exists independently of the tangible world. The numbers that we talk, here I am talking of the integers, mind it. Numbers, the integer numbers exist independently tangible of the world. I would like to make a note on this, just to quote from here. Number exists independently of the tangible world, and therefore their study was untainted by inaccuracies of perception. Their studies are untainted by inaccuracies of perception. That means why Einstein believes that Pythagorean theorem, that means anything which we consider to be inaccurate, which we consider the perception is inaccurate, that is untainted, that means it is untouched, it will exist independently of human existence. Right? I'll quote one line from this book of Thomas Stanley. This only in intellectual and wholly immaterial, really a substance, according to which, as being the most exact artificial reason, all things are perfected: time, heaven, motion, the stars, and their revolutions. See, most important in this line is that a wholly immaterial, yet really a substance, according to which, as being the most artificial reason, all things are perfected. Everything, the motion of bodies, the heavenly motion, time, space, everything is perfected based on what? Based on this, which is the number. And I would also like to quote, I think you know who was Leopold Kronecker. I have made a very small video on the life of Leopold Kronecker, through which we came to know the Kronecker delta, which is used in mathematics and tensor, where he said, God made the integers, all else is the work of man. God only made the integers, all else, the further numbers, fraction, imaginary numbers, are the work of man. Now, this is the Pythagorean belief that number exists independently, whether human beings are there, consciousness, unconsciousness. This is the development of thought of Pythagoras, which tells number exists independently. Now, if you look into the development of Einstein's, or I would say scientific thoughts, you will see initially it was hypotenuse squared equal to base squared plus perpendicular squared. So you read about Pythagoras. Then we got ds square equal to dx square plus dy plus dz. That is the differential element. Then we got delta x square, or even prior to that, delta x square, which is the big difference between x, y, and z. Delta x square equal to delta y plus delta z. From there we got into differential distance or differential geometry, which we use ds square. Further to that, Lorentz transformation, delta x square equal to delta y plus delta z, and then Einstein's remarkable contribution of minus c delta t square, which is the speed of light. So what is happening if you see through the development of thoughts, then you will see that we heavily dependent on Pythagoras, and we Lorentz transformations, root over 1 by v minus c square, all of this came initially from the deduction of Pythagoras. And Pythagoras believed that number is something which is independent of human being, and that is why he say that all things are perfected: time, heaven, motion, the stars, and the revolution. So the essence of all things or matters are something which is independent, and that is why you will see that Pythagoras, or during that time, they really worshipped numbers. So numbers, whatever happens, it exists independent of human consciousness. And that is why he tells that I believe it firmly in the Pythagorean theorem in geometry states that something approximately is true. But you see at the end what Einstein tells. He tells that there is also a truth relative to this reality, and in the same way the negation of the first engenders means to give a reason, to give a plausible reason, or to give a cause. So he says, and in the same way, the negation of the first engenders the negation of the existence of the latter. That means what he says in mathematical terms, if A is not equal to B and B is not equal to C, obviously A would not be equal to C. So that is why he puts it almost mathematically. He says that anyway, if there is a reality independent of man. So what he says, what Tagore said, okay, there is a reality which is independent of man, right? So A is not equal to B. There is also a truth relative to this reality, and in the same way, the negation of the first engenders, that means gives a reason, the negation of the existence of the latter. That means if the first is negative, obviously the second would be negative. So you can understand the way Einstein is talking. He's talking of a Pythagorean theorem where numbers are independent of existence of human being. And he takes an exception that even if I consider that it is not independent, if this is negative, then the next would be also. Now what Tagore tells, truth, which is one with the universal being, must essentially be human. Otherwise, whatever we individual realize as true can never be called truth. At least the truth which is described as scientific and can only be reached through the process of logic In other words, by an organ of thoughts which is human. According to Indian philosophy, there is Brahman, the absolute truth, which cannot be conceived by the isolation of the individual mind or described by words, but can only be realized by completely merging the individual in its infinity. But such a truth cannot belong to science. The nature of truth which we are discussing is an appearance. That is to say, what appears to be true to the human mind and therefore is human and may be called Maya or illusion. Now, you see that again, what Tagore tells is that truth which is one with the universal being must essentially be human. So, any truth which is one with the universal being and which Tagore believes is within me, not out here, not out there, is essentially human. Otherwise, whatever we individual realize a true can be called truth. At least the truth which is described as scientific and can be reached through the process of logic, in other words, by an organ of the thoughts which is human. That means any truth which science tells is truth is, as this we have discussed earlier, is being perceived by human senses, and that is through human organ which is human. Now he says that according to Indian philosophy, which is Brahman, which is called the absolute truth, which Tagore tells as a superpersonal being, right, which cannot be conceived by the isolation of the human mind. So the absolute truth which Tagore believes as per Indian philosophy, the Brahman, it cannot be achieved by isolation. What Einstein thinks that truth is out there, I am out here. No, it cannot be achieved through the individual mind or described by words. That means it even cannot be described by words. If you read the Upanishads, you will see that there are certain quotations in Sanskrit which tells that it cannot be described by words. I remember just casually something like achedvayam adhyahoyam akledva shushyo evacha nitya sarvagato stharun achaloyam sanatana. Achedvayam, which cannot be it cannot be struck off. Adhyahoyam, which cannot be burned. Akledva shushyo evacha, which cannot fall down. Nitya sarvagata stharuna chalovayam sanatana. It is infinite, it is nitya, and it continues forever. So the truth which Tagore believes, which is the Indian philosophy of Brahman truth, cannot be conceived by the isolation of the human mind, but only can be realized by completely merging the individual in its infinity. But such truth cannot belong to science. Remember, because science deals with organs, science deals with truth which is perceived by human perception. And something which is perceived by human perception is only human. But only that truth where you submerge yourself with the infinity, that is considered to be the truth. Now, before I go into the details of explaining this and the later part, I would like to, draw your attention towards this picture. As you see, this is the picture of School of Athens, which was drawn by Raphael many, many years ago on a fresco. And you can see there are two prominent figures in this picture. One is Plato, who is pointing his finger up, and that of Aristotle, who is pointing his finger down. Now, I would like to tell you why I am telling about this. Now, Plato is holding a book which is called Timaeus, and Aristotle is holding a book which is called Nicomachean Ethics. Now, I can find a kind of you might disagree with me, a kind of a similarity between the talks of Tagore and Einstein, which is Plato and Aristotle. So Plato's book Timaeus, if you read it later, is related to the birth of universal being, of the God, and a demiurge. He uses the word demiurge. Is pointing towards the heavens. Whereas Aristotle is holding the books which is called Nicomachean Ethics. And I will like to draw one particular line of Nicomachean Ethics, which is very relevant here. So the book 1, the Nicomachean Ethics, opens with this line: every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and pursuit, is thought to aim at some good, and for this reason the good has rightly been declared to be that at which all things aim. So every art, every inquiry, and similarly every action and pursuit is thought to aim at some good. This good, actually, there is a Greek word called eudaimonia. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it right or not. So eudaimonia actually means spirit, the goodness, the good feeling, right? And for this reason, the good has rightly been declared to be that at which all things aim. That means what Tagore says in here, that something good, something which we all aim, is basically the ethics. And Aristotle exactly opens the first line of the book of Nicomachean Ethics, that for this reason the good has rightly been declared to be that. That means good has been declared that, what? At which all things aim, which we are aiming. I would like to draw one line which is very interesting. In the book Religion of Man, there is a chapter called Spiritual Union, where Tagore says, but the positive aspect of the infinity is an Advaitam, in an absolute unity in which comprehension of the multitude is not an outer receptacle. You see, the comprehension of the multitude is not an outer receptacle, but as an inner perfection that permeates and exceeds its contents, like the beauty in lotus, which is ineffably more than all the constituents of the flower. I told you at the beginning that we will be talking about an analogy where Tagore uses flower. So he says that it is not an outer receptacle, but as an inner perfection that permeates, that is which is pervading amongst everyone. That is called vibhuti. Vibhuti we talked about, which permeates and exceeds in its contents, like the beauty in lotus, which is ineffably more than all the constituents of the flower. The ultimate product, the flower, is more beautiful than the constituents of the flower. Very important line. It is not the magnitude of extension, but an intense quality of harmony which evokes in us the positive sense of the infinite in our joy, in our love. So he tells something that it is not the magnitude of the extension of the intense quality. It is not that how big it is, or the magnitude of intense quality which evokes, but of harmony which evokes in us the positive sense of the infinite in our joy and in our love. So you remember that line of Tagore's song, Ei lobhinu songo tobo, sundaro he sundaro, dhonno holo ongo momo, punno holo ongo momo, dhonno holo antaro. Ei lobhinu songo tobo, sundaro he sundaro, punno holo ongo momo, dhonno holo antaro. I just translated this in English, something like, Thus in your company blossoms thy beauty and grace. Sacred becomes my soul, blessings for me as such embrace. So Shundaro he Shundaro, that beauty, that wonderful sense is only coming. It is not out there. That is why he says that it is not our outer receptacle, but as an inner perfection that permeates and exceeds its contents, like the beauty in lotus, which is ineffably more than all the constituents of the flower. It is not the magnitude of the extension, but an intense quality of harmony, which evokes in us the positive sense of the infinite. So as you can see that this, humming of the bees, the wonderful sky, this good morning, everything is permeating, and unless we get in harmony with the infinite, we are unable to understand. I remember that line, Sarva bhutas tamatmanang sarva bhutani chatmani ikshate yog yuktatma sarvatra samadarshana. Ikshate. That means once I sarva bhutas tamatmanang, everything lies within me. Sarva bhutani chatmani ikshate yog yuktatma sarvatra samadarshana. Once I see within that, everything is the same. Sarva bhuta sthitayo man bhajatte tvama sthitaha sarvatha vartumanopi sayogi mai vartate atmau pammena sarvatrang sarvati yo arjuna sukhang ya yadiva dukkhang sayogi paramo mataha. Whether it is sukha dukkha, that means whether it is happiness or melancholiness, sayogi paramo mataha. A yogi is always in peace. So sarvabhutas thamatmanang sarvabhutani chatmani. When I am trying to see that it is not the magnitude of the extension of the quality, but sarvabhutani chatmani, within everything. Ikshate yog yuktatma. Somebody which has got that kind of an eye, which Tagore is telling, sarvatra samadarshana. Ikshate, that means he sees everything as equal. Now, just an important line of the author Omiyo Dev in this book of Tagore Einstein Conversation on the nature of reality of Partho Ghosh. There are several authors who have written that. Omiyo Ghosh has drawn a wonderful line here. While he was standing on he means Tagore, while he was standing on the balcony of the Southern Street here in central Kolkata, where he was staying at the time with his elder brother, that this had the spirit of a truth is also evident from an essay called Manav Shatya, or Human Truth, appended as Manushe Dharmo, Human Religion, 3 years later to his Hibbert Lectures in 1930. Now he says, the moment the sun appeared from behind the trees, the veil from over my mind was lifted. I felt I was seeing the truth in the naked eye. I was looking at man's inner self. So the sunshine at Southern Street at a place in Kolkata where Tagore is standing, he says that as soon as the veil is lifted, what is the veil? The asatya. That veil that I and the superpersonal are different. No, the veil once is lifted, I can see. And what I can see? I can see the inner self of man. So we come to the almost to the end of this second episode. I would like to continue what Einstein said. So Einstein says, so according to your conception, which must be the Indian conception, it is not the illusion of the individual, but of humanity as a whole. Tagore, in science we go through the discipline of eliminating the personal limitations of our individual minds and thus reach that comprehension of truth which is in the mind of the universal man. Einstein, the problem begins whether truth is independent of our consciousness. Tagore, what we call truth lies in the rational harmony between the subjective and objective aspects of reality, both of which belong to the superpersonal man. We will explore about subjective and objective reality in the third part. Now you see what Einstein tells that, so as because Tagore was speaking about Brahman and Maya or illusion, words which are not known to the scientist Einstein. He said that means you are telling that whether it is an Indian conception, that it is not the illusion of the individual, it is the illusion of the humanity as a whole. Now you see what Tagore says. He says that in science we go through the discipline of elimination, process of eliminating. That means I am eliminating, this is not true, this is not true, this is not true. So I am a factor of eliminating the personal limitations of our individual minds. Shimar maje ashim tumi. That means the limit of a personal man is within me. That is the shima, that is the finite. But he says that in science we go through the process of eliminating the personal limitation. That means first, in order to understand the truth, we are eliminating the personal limitations, right? The personal limitations of our individual minds, and thus reach the comprehension of truth which is in the mind of the universal man. So Tagore says that even in science, through the process of experiment, hypothesis, induction, deduction, whatever we do, our aim is basically to reach the universal man. So he says that the science is a method of eliminating the untruth from the truth. We go through the discipline of eliminating the personal limitations of our individual minds. The limitation is within us and we are eliminating the untruth, the personal limitations of our individual minds, and thus reach, where do we reach? That comprehension of truth which is in the mind of the universal man. And he puts the universal in capital. That means the scientific journey of a man is not to keep the truth out. It is to submerge the truth within mind, within the self. That means Tagore says that the process of elimination is eliminating the untruth from the truth which is in the individual, and until and thus reach to that comprehension. What is that comprehension of truth which is in the mind of the universal man? The universal man is not out here, it is within me. Amar hyar maje lukiye chile dekhte ami chaili. You stayed within my mind, but I am unable to see. So it is my limitation, what it tells, that I cannot see. That is my limitation. that you stayed within my heart, right? হিয়ার মাঝে লুকিয়েছিলে দেখতে আমি পাইনি, I cannot see you. But that limitation is within me, and that is the personal limitations, the shima, the finite. And that can be eliminated through science, he tells. And what I am aiming to, and thus reach that comprehension of truth which is in the mind of the universal man. So our goal is to reach the universal man, because within my heart you are, I cannot see because my eyes are not trained, I am not up to that mark. And that is what science will lead to. Science will eliminate those limitations and reach the universal man or the universal mind. Einstein says that the problem again arises whether truth is independent of our consciousness. So Einstein continues on his own parameter that the problem lies whether truth is independent of consciousness. Tagore says what we call truth lies in the rational harmony between the subjective and objective aspects of reality, both of which belongs to the superpersonal man. So the subjective reality is something which we believe as subjective. Oh, it is so cold out here, it must be minus 10 degrees. Although it is not objectively, it is not minus 10 degrees. It may be plus 2 degrees. So subjective reality is obviously always subjective. What you think and what I think is not different, is different. You are subject to something, I am subject to something. Objective reality is something, yes, this is the truth. That means it is not minus 10 degree temperature, it is 2 degrees. It is not that I am dying out of pain, but yes, there is a pain. That is objective reality. Now Tagore says what? Tagore says that the truth lies in the rational harmony of the subjective and objective aspects of reality, both of which belongs to the superpersonal man. That means whatever subjective and objective reality that we are thinking, always subjective reality will be subject to bias, subject to prejudices, subject to limitations. And objective reality is something objective which we see. But Tagore says no. Subjective and objective reality, when it is in proper rational harmony, then only the truth can be achieved. And then only the truth is ikshate, we can see that. And he says that it belongs to the, both of which belongs to the superpersonal man. That means superpersonal man have a subjective reality which might be subjective, and the superpersonal man also have an objective reality which is objective. But there is a rational harmony. Now we are going to look forward what we meant by the rational harmony, and I think that we can conclude in the third part. It is already more than 42 minutes. I'm sure that I'm not boring with these talks. So we will take a pause on this second part of Tagore Einstein right now, right? Because we have arrived to one part where the conclusion would be made. So we will go forward with the third part where we explore what do we mean by subjective and objective reality and how the Tagore Einstein conversation concludes with those lines. So that's all from me. I hope you like this episode, and it is continuing till the end. So we learned and we dealt a lot, and I gave certain examples of Gita and Upanishads just to make you understand what was Tagore's opinion, what was Einstein's opinion, and how the conversation took place. So that is all from my side. I hope you enjoyed it. So do subscribe, like, and press the bell icon, because I'm coming with more such philosophical conversation. I'm planning to make one video series on Tagore's conversation with Roma Rolla, which was excellent. But let us see how things proceed. Bye, take care, and have a good weekend. Stay safe and stay happy. Bye.